of an experiment without a control group. The way you would really run this experiment, if you were going to run it fairly, is you'd have a group, you'd have group A, and when we're making our experiments, you're going to have to think about a control group for your experiments. You have group A and group B. You try and make the groups as similar as possible. Maybe you have 20 golfers in each group. Group A might be your control group. And you just let them practice with their own clubs for 2 weeks. Own clubs. And then group B is your experimental group. You let them practice 2 weeks also with the new clubs. And then you run your test to see how accurately they hit it. And the way they usually run these accuracy tests in golf is they run a line down the middle of the fairway and they say aim at that line. And they measure how far it lands away from the line. You see? If you really want to test it and take all the human influence out, you use a robot. They have golf hitting robots that test clubs, and the golf hitting robots swing exactly the same every time. So you can really test the accuracy of your club by taking all the human inconsistency out of it. You know what the golf hitting robot's name is? Iron Byron. So anyway, so they obviously did this without a control group. They just had one group practicing for 2 weeks, and of course it's going to get better because they practiced for 2 weeks. You need something to compare it to. We'll talk more about control groups in a little bit. Number 9, a man with professionally diagnosed terminal cancer decides to laugh till he dies. Instead of doing the normal chemotherapy and cancer treatment, he ignores it, rents funny movies, watches them all day. After a month, he's re-examined and his cancer's gone. This is a true story. The guy wrote a book. A lot of people try to follow what he did and get his same results.
Do they all die?
Well, most of them do. Yeah. Because he's the lucky one. There are some people that get cancer and it just goes away on its own. Doesn't matter what you do. Some people get cancer and just start drinking. They say, I'm going to drink until I die, and the cancer just goes away. I wouldn't tell anyone else to try to do that. Well, drinking didn't cure that cancer. Some cancers, your body has an immune system, and your body fights cancer, and sometimes your body wins. And so there was nothing to his cure, but there are lots of people who will ignore medication, chemotherapy, and stuff that they're supposed to do, and do whatever these people did because it worked for them, and that's not good advice. So yeah, so his book has probably killed a lot of people. But you ask him if his cure helped him, and he'll swear to it that it helped him. Right? Because he did it, and he ended up being cured, and so he thinks it's his cure that helped him, and you can't convince him otherwise. So that's good to think about. Think about the psychology. Just because it works for you, you know, if you go out and you pitch a no-hitter, I don't know if you're a pitcher in baseball, or you play your best tennis round of your life, and you look down, and you happen to be wearing 2 different colored socks, you're very likely to go out there for the rest of the time you play tennis with 2 different colored socks on, because you think that's what did it. Now, you probably would have played your best round without the different colored socks. But that's how people get what's the word I'm looking for? Superstitious. Yeah, that's how superstitions start. They worked for them that one time, so maybe it'll keep working. Dogs are thought by many to have a sixth sense. It's a true story of a dog that ran off from his family on a trip 300 miles from home and wasn't found. The family had to return home without the dog. 2 years later, family came home and the dog was sitting on the porch. He found his way home. He must have a sixth sense. Dogs have an incredible sixth sense, right?
He must be from the movie Homeward Bound.
Smell.
This is another example of what we call argument by anecdote. It's a single example. How many dogs do you think are lost that never make it home?
Too many.
They aren't. We never talk about them, do we? We talk about the one that does. And yes, dogs leave and get lost, and they wander in every which way. And some happen to wander back to their house, and some happen to wander off somewhere else and never get found. But you're only hearing about the one who got found here, you see. And so that's not a particularly incredible thing. There's bound to be some that make it back home somehow. Psychics can help to police investigations, be a help to police investigations. This is interesting. Did y'all read this? Kidnapped baby from a wealthy French family of royal descent was missing for over a month. Huge public investigation and exhaustive search failed to yield results until the baby and kidnapper were finally found on a boat at the very location a psychic gave the police earlier in the investigation. If the police had not ignored the psychic, they would have found the child much sooner. This is coming from the psychic is telling you, if the police hadn't ignored me, they would have found this sooner. I shouldn't be ignored. I'm a good psychic.
The psychic kidnapped the baby.
That's a good guess. It could have been that the psychic kidnapped the baby. That wasn't true.
There'd be thousands of people calling in, trying to give hints about where it is.
That's exactly what happened. What happened was the royal family in this case was prone to think psychics work. So early investigation, they said, they elicited the help, any psychics out there, call us and tell us where the baby is. And they got something like 10,000 calls. And there were 10,000 different places the psychics were telling them to search. And one of them happened to say the baby was on a boat in a marina. And that's the one, and that was the psychic that's telling you this. I told them where it was. All they had to do is search the marinas. Well, if they'd have searched everywhere the 10,000 psychics told them to, they'd eventually found them, because that would have been searching everywhere. You see? So again, that's another form of argument by antidote. You're taking one success, and you're not thinking about all the other possible misses. Magnetic bracelets. How many of y'all wear this or know somebody who does? They sell these things on TV. It's a $100 million industry. You ever seen them advertised? Magnetic bracelets. Multiple studies of people with persistent back pain show that people who wear the bracelets report less back pain than those who do not wear them. Everyone with back pain should get a magnetic bracelet, right? Good money. What's going on here?
Placebo.
Well, first of all, it could be a placebo, like my colleague Wayland has so intelligently pointed out. Or it could be that the fact that people who buy magnetic bracelets just happen to have less back pain in general than people who don't.
That's good thinking too, the second one. Let's talk about the first one. The placebo effect is something we'll learn about in here. And it's something that's very powerful. If you think something helps you, it probably helps you. And the placebo effect is very complicated. And but for instance, if you have a headache and I give you a pill, and it could be just a sugar pill, is what doctors often use, or a starch pill. A starch pill doesn't have any taste. It doesn't taste sweet. If I give you a starch pill and you have a headache and you take it and you think that starch pill is aspirin, your headache will probably go away. Maybe not as well as aspirin, but your thinking has a lot to do with your health. And so if you think something works, it often helps. And doctors have a real tough time with this, because sometimes they'll prescribe a medication for a patient, and they'll ask the patient in the next visit, they'll say, how's the medication working? And they'll say, yeah, I'm doing a lot better. And the doctor really can't take their word for it there. They have to check them out and keep watching them. My dad's a retired surgeon, and he said he used to do surgeries to fix somebody's ulcer or something like that. And often after the surgery, the person would report that they were doing much better, because they thought they had surgery, it probably will go away now, and they don't really feel the pain as much. And then later they find out it comes back, and they actually, the surgery didn't completely prevent it, and the ulcer was able to come back. Not all surgeries are successful. So the placebo effect is a very powerful thing. You've probably heard of the sugar pills before or something like that. So we'll talk about all these things. You have to keep them all in mind when you're making a when you're making an experiment. Oh, by the way, did you look at these graphs on the back?
Yep.
Let's see if I can put these up. Lying with statistics.
Ooh.
That is something that's commonly done in advertising. And you should be aware of what's going on so that you're not taken in. So we have this graph here. The 7th grade's not doing anything. 7th grade's terrible. They can't raise any money.
But actually, starts at 1,000.
6th grade's way better, according to that graph. Well, they started at $1,000, you see. If the axes went all the way down to 0, then the 7th grade would have actually a rather large column, thank you. And so that's kind of a misleading graph. And they've done the same thing over here with bowling averages. Looks like Hildy there, just almost bowling 0, but Hildy's actually up around 115 or so, 112, and that's not too bad.
Perfect games.
How about, and they've done the same thing over here. There's 3 graphs on the right. Look, it looks like nobody wants hamburgers. Nobody's favorite food is hamburgers. But they started the graph at 950. So if you go all the way down to 0, it's actually pizza, hot dogs, and hamburgers are real close. 985 and 970 and 955 are real close. That's real close voting if you look at percentage of votes. It's almost the same percentage for each of those. But it makes it look like hot dogs are way more favored than hamburgers, the way they've done the graph. What about this one? Did y'all figure this one out?
The year is different. It's like it goes up by 2 and then it goes up by 1.
Yeah, look, it goes 92, 94, 95. What happened to 93? And then 97. What happened to 96? And 98 is gone. 99 is there, and 2000. Well, what this person is doing is showing you that hurricanes are going up, according to this graph, but they've left out some data, and the data points they left out were real low hurricane numbers. You see? So this graph actually goes in 93 would have gone way down. In 94 and 95 it would have come up. In 96 it would have gone way down. In 97 come up. In 98 it would have gone way down. So if they show you the graph as they're actually it should be represented, you would look at it and go, oh, it just kind of goes up and down. There's no real pattern. But the way they cherry pick their data, they make it look like it's going up and getting a lot worse. Isn't that sneaky? So, critical thinking is being able to examine things like this and see what it's really saying, examine things people say, and be able to not get fooled by things. And also, it is you not falling into those traps yourself. Okay? I mean, the next time, your mom says, you're not going out tonight. You never let me go out. Should probably not be the first thing you say, because that's probably not true, is it? You never let me go out. You're taking one example and you're applying it as an argument to a whole. That's a little lapse in critical thinking there. So try and use critical thinking as much as possible in the rest of your life, and you'll be automatically ahead of where the rest of the population is. If you could teach everyone in the country this class, teach them about critical thinking, think how much smarter the population is. Think of the millions and billions of dollars just wasted on psychics The psychics alone, billions of dollars. I have a friend who gives $10 a month to a psychic service, or a horoscope is what she does, and they send her a horoscope. She pays $10 for it. So you know what I did? I went to the site and I picked out a horoscope and I read it to her, and I said, and I read her and I said, how does that apply to you? And she's like, oh yeah, that's exactly, it said something about new relationships. See how it says new relationship? I met, somebody just the other day. And I said, well, this isn't your horoscope I was reading you. It was the month before. And she's like, let me see that. See, they make it so any horoscope applies to anyone. They use generalities and things, you see. But that didn't stop her from doing it. She still does it. $10 a month. And she said, well, it makes me feel better, and it probably does, and that's okay. And I said, you know what makes me feel better? Money. Having the money. So anyway, I ruin everybody's fun. But that's one of the things that I do. Okay. Let's see. We're going now. Why don't you open your books? We're going to start talking a little bit more about experiments in here. I guess it's page 21. Is that where we're on? Or 17?
22.
Oh, great Odin's raven!
Let me read you this. Listen to this. This is also from my favorite scientist, Carl Sagan, talking about critical thinking. My favorite example is this story told about the Italian physicist Enrico Fermi, newly arrived on American shores, enlisted in the Manhattan Nuclear Weapons Project, and brought face-to-face in the midst of World War II with U.S. flag officers. Have you all heard of the Manhattan Project? It's when they built the first nuclear bombs. They brought a whole bunch of scientists together and built nuclear bombs because they thought Germany was building them. If Germany got them and we didn't, that would be bad. So we decided to get all our scientists, not just from this country, but from other countries. And so they brought in this guy, Enrico Fermi, and Enrico Fermi is one of the smartest people in the world, to help build this nuclear bomb. You may have heard it. He's a physicist from Italy. So-and-so is a great general, he was told. What's the definition of a great general? Fermi characteristically asked. I guess it's a general who's won many consecutive battles, the guy says. How many? Fermi says. After some back and forth, they settled on 5. What fraction of American generals are great? Fermi asked the guy. After some more back and forth, they settled on a few percent. But imagine, Fermi rejoined, that there is no such thing as a great general, that all armies are equally matched, and that winning a battle is purely a matter of chance. Then the chances of winning one battle is 1 out of 2, or 1/2. 2 battles is 1/4, 3 1/8, 4 1/16, and 5 consecutive battles is 1/32, which is about 3%. You would expect a few percent of American generals to win 5 consecutive battles purely by chance. Now, has any of them won 10 consecutive battles? Isn't that funny? The guy just makes a comment like, yeah, this guy's a great general, and then this guy, who's one of the smartest people in the world, tears apart his idea of what is great. Thought that was funny. Okay. So, you're going to have to do an experiment in here. And there's a lot of different ways you can do an experiment. And the first type of experiment we're going to look at is called a case study. You could do a case study. I've never had a student do a case study. But a case study is just a study of one individual or maybe one group of individuals, and following that case study along. Case studies are often interesting. We'll look at a lot of case studies as we go through. There's a case study of a person that they talk about in the reading here, and I want you to do your reading tonight. One such case involved a 13-year-old girl who had been cruelly locked up in a small room since infancy. Her mother, a battered wife, barely cared for her, and no one in the family spoke a word to her. If she made the slightest sound, her severely disturbed father beat her with a large piece of wood. When she was finally rescued, Jeannie, as researchers called her, did not know how to chew or stand erect, and her only sounds were high-pitched whimpers. Eventually, she began to use words and understand short sentences. And even after many years, her grammar and pronunciation remained abnormal. She never learned to use pronouns correctly, ask questions, produce proper negative sentences, or use the little word endings that communicate things like tense and possession. This sad case, along with similar ones, suggests that a critical period exists for language development, with the likelihood of mastering a first language declining steadily after early childhood and falling off drastically at puberty. So that's a case study that teaches you something about language, even though it's really sad and a terrible thing. You can follow that and learn about language. There's a guy we're going to study in a case study who is a savant. Have you ever heard of a savant?
Smart person.
Yeah, well, a savant is really incredible in a few areas and then really deficient in a lot of other areas. For instance, there are some math savants out there. If you give them a math problem, what is 667 divided by 245? And they'll just start ripping off the answer in decimal points. You can go out to 15, 20 decimals, no problem. Just right in their head. How do they do that? I don't know. They're savants. And so we're going to study one of the savants in particular. His name's Kim Peek. He's amazing. And what he can do teaches us about the way the brain works. Because he had his brain studied through MRIs and CAT scans and brain waves and things. And we learned a lot about the brain just from that one case study. So case study is just following a case along and looking at it.
Is he zip codes?
Yeah, he can do any zip code. If you say St. Simon's Island, he'll go 31522. He's not even from here. Isn't that amazing? And he had a guy at the post office. He goes, even we got internet on the internet. It takes a few seconds, and he could do it faster than the internet. Reads a book like this. He can do 2 pages, and what would take you 10 minutes, he can do in 10 seconds. He reads the left page with the left eye and the right page with the right eye. And remembers 97% of what's on there. How about that? You know what he does all day? He goes to the library. He reads everything. He never gets tired of it.
Does he understand what's written on it?
Yes. Yes, and he can converse and tell you things. And there's a movie that was based on him called Rain Man. Have you ever heard of that?
It's a good movie.
So what is it that he's bad at?
It's got Dustin Hoffman.
He can't tie his shoes. He can't take care of himself. He can't get dressed. He has to be shaved by his father. He can't carry on a normal conversation. If you say, get a hold of yourself, he goes like this. He doesn't understand a lot of the nuances.
How does he read? I bet people say that stuff in the books too.
I don't know. That's a good question. It says it in books, and he takes it literally. There's no figuratively in it. But we'll spend a day talking about him, and I'll show you a great video on him. But actually, he just died last year. Yeah, it's kind of sad because he's a really nice. Everything about it, he's almost like a little kid the way he acts. I think what happened is his father died, who took care of him his whole life, and he died just right after that. It's probably of sadness. Observational studies. An observational study is done when you're watching. You know, part of psychology is watching things happen, and you can't do everything in a lab. Part of psychology is social psychology, the way people interact with one another. And if you pull somebody off the street and put them in a lab, they aren't going to act the same way as they would when they're out there. You know? If I took two of you out from lunch and set you in this room and watched the way you act, you wouldn't act the same. You'd be going, you know, what's going on here? And people act differently when they're being watched and they know they're being watched. So if I want to do something on social behavior, I might watch you from afar without you knowing. I might watch from the window up here and see how you converse. Maybe I could do an experiment on how often you use your hands in conversation. Here's an experiment idea. I just thought of it. Do girls use their hands more in conversation than guys do? That's something you would probably want to do as an observational study, in a social setting. Just watching from a window. Take two girls and you count, maybe if I want some data on it, I could count the number of hand movements per minute. And it might be hard to count, so I might want to videotape it. And go back and count it later so I can pause when I lose track and go back. It's starting to get to be a pretty big experiment now, isn't it? There's a lot involved with it. It's a good idea. I like it. You know, who knows? Who uses more hand movements? Guys or girls, do you know? You might have a hypothesis. What's your hypothesis?
I'd say girls.
Girls? Okay. There you go. There's an experiment. That could be yours. Here's a neat one that was done. Guy sat in the movie theater in the projection booth window and looked down in the theater, and he charted how close people sit together. And so in a theater in America, when we sit down, somebody else comes in, they don't sit right next to someone who's already seated. They sit a certain distance away. And as the theater fills up, there's kind of equal spacing between people. That's how it happens in America. You know how it happens in Russia? Completely different. If you're sitting in the middle of the theater alone, and in Russia somebody comes into the theater, they come sit right by you. Isn't that weird? In America, if somebody did that, you'd be like, oh, I gotta go get some popcorn. And they huddle together. And the first thing you might say in Russia, well, it's cold in Russia. They're huddling together for warmth. But if I was doing an experiment like that, what would I make sure happened?
Room temperature is the same.
The same room temperature in both theaters that I was measuring. You see, that's called a control. Controlling your variables is important in experiments. So if somebody said, well, it's because they're cold, you'd say, well, I had the theaters the same temperature.
So when you think.
So that's interesting. So that's a little bit of cultural psychology there. Our culture is spread out as far as you can, get away from people, from everyone else. And their culture is get as close together as you can. Comrades. So those are observational studies. Now, a lot of times your study will be a test. I've had a lot of students of mine in their experiments do tests. And you can give a test, like a survey. You ever taken a survey before?
Mm-hmm. You?
And lots of times the tests are standardized. Standardized test is a uniform procedure for giving and scoring a test. Have you ever noticed when you go in to take the SAT that they read from a script?
Yep.
It's supposed to be given the same way in every institution. So they require whoever's giving the test to read from a script. It's supposed to take the same amount of time in every institution. It's the same questions, everything the same. They don't want anyone to have an advantage, you see. That's a standardized test. Norms are established. Standards of performance. What they'll do is they take the SAT, and you don't know this, but before they ever gave it to you, they gave it to another set of kids. Maybe 1,000 kids or so. And they saw what they made on the test. And so they figured what's the average grade on this test, what's the highest grade, what's the lowest grade. They made a bell curve of the results. Those are called norms. Norms are established. And then they can compare your score to what the norms are, you see, to see how well you did. And they make it on the SAT. Well, the SAT has changed since I took it. 800 was in the middle, and 1600 was the high, or I guess maybe 900 was in the middle, and 100 was the low, something like that. But you know, it's different now. They only have 3 sections now. They've changed the SAT. They've changed the SAT since I made 1590. Reliability is if a test is consistent. Consistency of score is derived from a test. A reliable test should give you the same number, the same grade each time you take it. Okay? For instance, have you ever taken an IQ test before? No one in here taken an IQ test? You're going to take one in this class. It'll be fun. Don't worry, no one else will see what you make on it, but we'll go online and take an online IQ test. Well, if the IQ test is reliable, you should make about the same score every time you take the IQ test. Of course, they change up the question, so it's not the exact same question each time. And so if I'm a 160 IQ, that's genius. I'm not a 160 IQ, but if I was, I make a 160 when I take the test, and then I take it several months later, I should make around 160 again. I shouldn't make 90 the second time. If I make 90 the second time around, it's probably not a very reliable test. Reliability is giving the same sorts of scores each time. If my biology tests are reliable, I get about the same average on it each year for each class, you see. Unless one class is particularly good, they might make a higher average. But it should return about the same scores. Validity is the ability of a test to actually measure what it was designed to measure. What's an IQ test designed to measure? Which means what? Do you know? How intelligent you are. A test can be reliable without being valid. For instance, I could go in and score the same thing each time I take this test. 160, 158, 162, 161, the 4 times I take it. But if I'm a stupid person, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's a reliable test. It's giving you the same score, but it's not a valid test. It's not measuring intelligence. It's giving me a high score when I'm not a very smart person, you see. A valid test is something that correctly measures your whatever it's designed to measure. So a valid IQ test would give a high score to smarter people and a low score to dumber people. Teachers aren't ever supposed to use the word dumb, but I use it all the time. Or stupid. But none of us are, but I like to talk about other people outside the class. Like the freshmen, I mean, they're just... So, you need to know what those words mean. Standardized, norm, reliability, validity. Those are good. You'll get those on multiple choice questions on the next test. Susie comes in and makes 100 on a test. Susie comes in, takes the same test a week later, and makes a 50. You would say the test is not A, valid, B, reliable, C, standardized, D, normal.
Reliable.
It's not reliable. Y'all probably heard of what a survey is. It's a questionnaire or an interview. You give out a survey. People fill it out. There's all sorts of things you have to know about surveys. There's a whole class you can take on how to write a survey and how to give a survey. That's one of the things my mom works for the government, and she makes sure that they write their surveys correctly. Okay. For instance, if I'm going to give out a survey, I'm going to come up to you and I'm going to say, you want to take a survey on racial prejudice? And you say, yeah. And I say, okay, go to it. You think that might affect his results if I'm standing here watching him take it? Yeah? So you might want to let him take it somewhere else, not right in front of you. You see, things like that. Questions have to be worded the right way. You don't want to you don't want to ask leading questions, you know. Have you ever heard it in law? They say, oh, that's a leading question in the courtroom, you know, that sort of thing. You know, you can't lead a witness to a certain answer. Like if you were giving a survey on abortion, you wouldn't write a question that says, do you approve of killing babies? I think that's a little bit leading question. Everybody's going to say, no, I don't approve of killing babies. You might want to talk about abortion in more neutral terms than that. You also wouldn't say something like, do you approve of allowing the mother to have freedom of choice? Allowing the mother the freedom she is given in the Constitution? You know, you're kind of leading them to say yes in that respect too. If you're trying to get an idea of how people really feel about abortion, you want to be somewhere in between those two. A representative sample is very important. You need to get a good mix of people taking a survey. In other words, if you're doing a survey on should we, let's say I'm doing a survey on should we allow off-campus lunch at Frederica? And, you know, if I give that only to the seniors, I might get totally different answers than if I give it to the seniors and the faculty and the parents. You see what I'm saying? So you want to get a representative sample. A representative sample includes some of everyone. You know, if I wanted to say, should marijuana be legalized, I probably shouldn't just give it to the pot smokers. I should probably pick out a representative sample of everyone. And then I could get more of an idea of what my survey is asking. So writing surveys is not easy, and you could do a survey as your experiment. But if you're going to do a survey, you need to put some thought into how you're going to write the question. Do a little research on how to write survey questions, which I can point you to. You can find it on the internet. I want you to take a look at some graphs here. We have about out of time. What time is period in? Anyone? Bueller? Okay. Look. Take a look at these graphs. They're on the top of page 23. And you have to read through page 24 tonight. Or 24. Here we have a graph where they found out the annual income in thousands of dollars that people make, and probably they did this in a survey. They give you a survey, they say, write down in the survey how much you make. And so this is kind of an old study, so the income is lower than what you might expect people to be making now, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. And years of education is on the left here. So if you graduated high school, you had 12 years of education. If you graduated college, 16 years of education. See what I'm saying? And so they asked people on this survey, and you can see there's a trend in their... each plot is for each survey. So this particular person here looks like he got to second grade, and he makes about $4,000 a year. See? And this guy right here makes $20,000 a year, and he has a 6th grade education. And this guy right here makes $25,000 a year, and he graduated college. Okay? Again, this was a long time ago, so they'd probably be making more now out of college, but you never know. What do you notice about these plots? Is it just random the way these are plotted?
The more education you have, mainly the more money you'll have.
Nice. The more education you have, it seems the more money you have. There's an upward slant to the right. We call that a positive correlation. And what you can do, you can actually draw what's called a line of best fit. And computers can do this. They can draw a line that averages all these points out, and the line would go up through right about there. And you can do it by hand and just kind of guess where the line should go, but a computer can do it exactly. And there's the line of best fit, goes right through there. We call that a positive correlation. So years of education and annual income are positively correlated. Now, here's annual income versus dental problems requiring care. See, this person makes $25,000. They have only had 2 dental problems. This person who makes $5,000 has had 16 dental problems. And this person that makes $1,000 a year, they've had 24 dental problems in their life. And you can see we have a negative slant to this. It's like going downhill. Going downhill slant is a negative correlation. Going uphill slant is a positive correlation. Trey, you getting any of this? How many dental problems have you had? You're not getting any of this. We're talking about dental problems versus annual income. Look at these. Now this is aggressiveness versus height. So here's a very tall person here, and they got an aggressiveness score. So I guess you take a survey and it sees how aggressive you are. Maybe on the survey it says, how many fights did you get in this year? You know, maybe that would go into it. And you put a number. How often do you get real angry? And you put, and so this survey, you end up with some aggressiveness score. And here's your aggressiveness score. And it looks like it doesn't matter how tall you are. The aggressiveness just varies. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And that's called a zero correlation. And the line of best fit is straight there. And so what we can establish here is what's called a coefficient of correlation. The coefficient of correlation is always between -1 to +1. It's a number. It's a decimal point number. And so this thing on the right, that's zero correlation. Here we have an uphill. These points are going uphill. And so that's a positive correlation. It's not +1, though. It's not a completely positive correlation. Because in a completely positive correlation, all the points would be right on top of the line that's drawn on the slope here. If there's a line that's drawn on the slope and all the points are right on the line, that's a +1 correlation. But so this isn't completely positively correlated. It's just somewhat positively correlated. This might be a 0.5 correlation. This one looks like all the points are a little bit closer to the line. So this might be a 0.7 correlation or so. You could imagine if every point made a perfect line, that'd be a +1 correlation.
Do you make it negative if it's negative correlation?
Yeah, this would be a -1. This would be a -0.7 correlation or so. -0.6, something like that. The more clustered the lines get, or the points get around that line, the closer to +1 or -1. And the more spread out they are, the further from +1 or -1. This is as spread out as you can get, so that's a zero correlation. They aren't clustered around either any line anywhere. Okay, so that's correlations. So we're done. So read through 24. Could be a quiz, another quiz tomorrow. And we're going to start a video on experiment. Has anyone, a couple of people have come to me with experiment ideas. Anyone else thought of an experiment? Just raise your hand if you've thought of an experiment idea and you think that you've got an idea.